My sister's son almost died because she thought he was pretending to be sick out of jealousy. But then the truth hurt. I don't even know where to begin, or if anyone will even read this, but I feel like I'm suffocating and I need to get this out. I need an outside perspective because I think I might have destroyed my family to save it, and I honestly don't know if I did the right thing. For context, my family is, well, we're a lot. We live in Cali, Colombia, in one of those townhouse complexes, where everyone's front door is basically an extension of everyone else's living room. The air always smells like arepas frying, someone's always blasting salsa music, and privacy is a concept we mostly just read about. My sister Marcella, 32F, lives 3 doors down from me. We've always been like that. Less like sisters, more like two halves of the same person. She was my rock, the one I'd run to for everything. Her son, my nephew Nico, 8M, is the sweetest, most sensitive kid you'll ever meet. He's the kind of boy who will cry if he accidentally steps on a bug and will spend an hour trying to make a little leaf and twig splint for a flower with a bent stem. He's always been an old soul, quiet and observant. He was Marcella's whole world. Then, 3 months ago, my niece was born, and the whole world tilted on its axis. The chaos was immediate. Our loud, vibrant family life became a pressure cooker. The new baby was colicky, a tiny tyrant with lungs of steel, and sleep became a distant memory for my sister. I'd walk into her house and the air would be thick with the scent of sour milk and desperation. Marcella, who was once so vibrant and put together, started looking like a ghost. Her eyes were permanently shadowed, her hair was always thrown into a messy bun, and she had this constant, frantic energy, like a wire stretched too tight. At first, we all chalked it up to the new normal. But a new narrative started taking root, one planted by her partner, Dario. He's always had, this very traditional, boys need to be tough mentality that grated on me, but I kept my mouth shut. Now, with Marcella so exhausted and vulnerable, his voice became the loudest one in her head. Suddenly, any need Nico expressed was reframed. It wasn't a little boy adjusting to a massive life change, it was a calculated bid for attention. If he asked his mom to read him a story while she was nursing the baby, he was being manipulative. If he complained about a scraped knee from playing outside, he was being dramatic to steal focus. It started small, with Dario saying things like, "He's fine, Marce, let him be a boy." But it grew into this ugly, unshakable theory that Nico was a jealous mastermind plotting to reclaim his throne. And the worst part is, Marcella, in her sleep-deprived haze, started to believe it. Her patience, once a deep and endless well, was now a shallow puddle. She was so overwhelmed by the baby's constant screaming that any sound from Nico, a question, a complaint, even a laugh that was a little too loud, was met with a sharp, "Nico, not now," that felt like a slap. I was watching my best friend disappear, and my sweet nephew was being treated like an inconvenience. And I just stood there, watching it all happen, feeling the sick dread coiling in my stomach. This wasn't some sudden switch that flipped the moment the baby came home. Looking back, the groundwork was laid a long time ago, mostly by Dario. My BIL has this machismo thing that I always found irritating, but I figured it was harmless. But it wasn't. It was like a slow-acting poison. I remember last year, Nico was learning to ride his bike and took a nasty tumble on the cobblestones outside. He came running inside, knee bleeding, fat tears streaming down his face, looking for his mom. Before Marcella could even get up, Dario blocked his path, knelt down, and said in this booming voice, "What's this? Tears? Champions don't cry over a little scrape. Man up, Nico, shake it off." I saw the confusion on Nico's face. He just stood there, bleeding and hiccuping, while his dad performed this weird, tough love theater. Back then, Marcella would swoop in after a moment, give Dario a look, and scoop Nico up for a hug and a Band-Aid. But the seed was planted. Nico learned that his pain was a performance issue. After my niece was born, Marcella's exhaustion became Dario's amplifier. He didn't have to be the bad guy anymore, because she was too tired to be the good guy. The change in her was terrifying. A few weeks ago, I was over there trying to help, holding the baby while Marcella attempted to drink a cup of coffee that had been reheated 3 times. Nico came in from the garden, his little hand held out. "Mommy," he said, his voice trembling, "I think I got stung by a bee." I saw it, a red, angry welt already swelling on his palm. A year ago, Marcella would have dropped everything. We would have been running for ice, for baking soda paste, for anything to soothe him. This time, she didn't even turn around. She just let her head fall back against the sofa cushions with a loud, theatrical sigh that sucked all the air out of the room. "Nico, please," she said, her voice flat and dead. "I have a screaming baby attached to me 24/7, and I haven't slept in what feels like a decade. It's a bug bite. You will survive." She said it with such finality, such utter dismissal. I watched Nico's face crumble. He just slowly lowered his hand, his eyes shiny with tears he was obviously trying not to shed, and whispered, "Okay, Mommy." Then he turned and walked silently back outside. I felt a hot, angry lump form in my throat. I wanted to scream at her, to shake her and say, "What is wrong with you? That's your son." But I just took the baby from her, went and found the sting cream myself, and quietly put it on his hand in the garden. He didn't even thank me, he just gave me this haunted look that said, "See? No one cares." And that was the biggest change. Nico went quiet. He used to be this little chatterbox, always running into my house to tell me about a cool rock he found or a story he made up. Now, he just stopped. He stopped coming to his mom with his problems, big or small. He stopped talking about his day at school. He became a ghost in his own home, slipping around the edges of the chaos, trying to be invisible. He'd come to my place and just sit on my floor, drawing for hours without saying a word. The silence was heavier than any tantrum. It was the sound of a little boy learning that his voice didn't matter, and this sick, heavy feeling settled deep in my gut. Everyone kept saying, "Oh, it's just sibling jealousy, it'll pass." But I just knew that it was something more. Something was deeply, horribly wrong, and I was the only one who seemed to see it. And then came the welcome party for the baby. Our whole family packed into their small townhouse. The air was thick with the smell of fried empanadas and my tia's perfume. Salsa. Music was playing, my cousins were laughing, and everyone was cooing over the new baby, who Marcella was holding like a tiny, precious shield against the world. But the energy around my sister was all wrong. She was smiling, but it was a brittle, paper-thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked like a frayed electrical wire, one touch away from sparking. I tried to stay close to offer to take the baby, but she just shook her head, clutching her daughter tighter. About an hour in, I saw Nico worm his way through the crowd of legs. He looked small and pale under the bright kitchen lights. He gently tugged on the sleeve of Marcella's dress. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice so quiet I could barely hear him over the music. "My tummy really, really hurts, like a sharp poke." The change in Marcella was instant. Her fake smile vanished. Her face hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated annoyance. She didn't even look down at him properly. "Nicholas, I am not doing this with you right now," she hissed, her voice low and sharp. "Everyone is here. You are not the center of attention today. Your sister is. This jealousy is getting pathetic. Stop it. Go to your room, now." A few of our tias nearby went quiet, their eyes darting between Marcella and this heartbroken little boy. Nico's face just crumpled. He didn't cry or argue. He just gave her this look, this awful, wounded look, nodded and disappeared up the stairs. My heart absolutely shattered. I wanted to run after him. I wanted to grab my sister by the shoulders and scream at her. But she was already turning back to our cousins, forcing that brittle smile back onto her face, and I froze. Who was I to undermine a struggling new mother in front of the entire family? The thought felt like a betrayal. So I waited. An hour passed, then 2. The music got louder. People started drinking aguardiente, but all I could think about was Nico, alone in his room. That sick feeling in my gut was back, twisting into a tight, painful knot. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that she was his mother and she knew best. But I couldn't shake the image of his pale face. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I made an excuse about needing the bathroom and slipped up the stairs. His door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and the smell hit me first, the sour, acidic smell of vomit. Nico was curled up in his bed, hugging a pillow. He was drenched in sweat. His skin had this gray, waxy sheen to it, and his sheets were kicked onto the floor next to a small pile of sick. My blood ran cold. I rushed over and put my hand on his forehead. He was burning up. "Nico, honey, what's wrong? Are you okay?" He just whimpered. I helped him sit up and went to the bathroom to get him a glass of water. My hands were shaking. When I came back, he took a tiny sip, his eyes barely open. He leaned his head against my shoulder, and his body felt limp, unnervingly weak. He whispered something so faint I had to lean in to hear it. "Tia Gabi. I can't feel my legs." I froze, the plastic cup crushing in my hand. Every horror story, every medical drama flashed through my mind. At that exact moment, I looked up and saw Marcella standing in the doorway, the baby on her hip. She wasn't looking at Nico. She was looking at me, her expression a mixture of anger and exhaustion. "Are you serious?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "He can't feel his legs now. Gabi, don't encourage this. He is fine." And then she rolled her eyes. She rolled her eyes at her son, who was pale and sweating and telling me he couldn't feel his limbs. In that second, something inside me snapped. It wasn't fatigue anymore. It wasn't stress. It was cruelty. A switch flipped in my brain so hard and so fast that it felt like a physical click. The debate was over. The family drama didn't matter. Her feelings didn't matter. All that mattered was the little boy limp in my arms. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had to get him out of there. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't even breathe, I think. The rage that filled me was so pure and so cold it felt like ice water flooding my veins. It wasn't the hot, messy anger I was used to. It was silent, sharp, and absolutely clear. In that moment, watching her roll her eyes at her own suffering child, my sister became a stranger to me. She was an obstacle. Without a word, I gently laid Nico back on the pillow and stood up. I walked straight towards the doorway where she was still, standing, blocking the path with the baby on her hip like a shield. I didn't look at her face. I looked through her. "Move," I said. My voice was a stranger's too, low and dead. I don't know what she saw in my eyes, but she flinched and stepped aside as if she'd been burned. I walked past the entire party, a sea of confused faces turning to watch me. I could feel their questions hanging in the air, but I didn't care. I went straight to the small wooden hook by the front door where she always hung her car keys. The little metal flamingo keychain felt heavy and cold in my palm. I turned, walked back up the stairs, and scooped Nico into my arms. He was so light, terrifyingly light. He whimpered and buried his face in my neck. As I carried him down the stairs and past my sister, who was just standing there with her mouth hanging open, all I said was, "We're going for a ride." The second the car door closed, it was like a spell broke. The salsa music from the party was muffled, and the only sound was Nico's shallow breathing and the frantic thumping of my own heart. But my mind was a machine. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was it. This was the point of no return. I wasn't just taking my nephew to the ER, I was blowing up our entire family structure. Marcella, Dario, my parents, my tias, they would all close ranks. I would be the dramatic, hysterical sister who kidnapped her nephew to make a point. I was going to be the villain in this story. And I decided right then, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, that if I was going to be the villain, I would be a prepared one. 5 blocks from the hospital, I saw the glowing green cross of a 24-hour pharmacy and pulled over into its empty parking lot. Nico was moaning softly beside me, and every second felt like a dagger. But I forced myself to be methodical. I unlocked my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I had to try twice. I scrolled through my texts with Marcella from earlier in the afternoon. I'd messaged her. "Is Nico okay?" He looked a little off when I dropped by. Her reply came back instantly. He's fine. Just being a brat about the baby again. I can't deal with his dramatics. Screenshot. Saved to a new folder I labeled Proof. Then I did something that felt even colder. I went into my voice notes. Weeks ago, I had been on the phone with Dario, and in the background I could hear Nico crying softly, saying his stomach hurt. I'll never forget Dario's loud, booming voice, dripping with condescending machismo. "Champions don't whine," he'd said over the phone, clearly speaking to his son. "Man up. You're fine." I had been so disgusted that I'd saved the recording without really knowing why. Now I knew. I found the file. I checked that it played. My case wasn't just for them. It was for anyone who would try to tell me I was overreacting. It was armor. I finally pulled into the emergency room bay. The moment a triage nurse saw Nico's gray face, and the way I was carrying him, we were rushed through the doors. They laid him on a bed, and a team descended on him. They put a tiny bracelet on his wrist, and he just looked at me with these huge, terrified, trusting eyes. Only then, when I knew he was in safe hands, did I step out into the fluorescent-lit hallway, pull out my phone, and call my sister. She picked up on the first ring, already screaming. "Where are you? What do you think you're doing, Gabriella? You can't just take my son!" I let her shriek, holding the phone away from my ear. When she paused to take a breath, I cut in. My voice was completely flat, devoid of any emotion at all. "We're at the hospital. He's being seen." Then I hung up. It didn't take long. Maybe 15 minutes. I was standing by Nico's gurney, stroking his hair while a nurse tried to get a blood pressure reading from his small arm, when I heard her. Her voice, sharp and furious, echoed down the sterile white hallway before I even saw her. She burst through the double doors like a hurricane, her face a thundercloud of rage. Dario was trailing behind her, looking smug and angry, like I'd personally insulted him. She didn't look at Nico. She didn't ask a single question about his condition. Her eyes, bloodshot with exhaustion and fury, locked on me. "Are you insane?" she shrieked, and a few people in the waiting area turned to look. "You kidnapped my son. You snuck him out of my house to pull this ridiculous dramatic stunt because you can't stand not being the center of attention for 1 second." I just stood there, my hand resting on Nico's shoulder. I didn't move. I felt strangely calm, like I was watching a movie of my own life. All the heat from my earlier anger had burned away, leaving behind something cold and hard. "Marcella, you're making a scene," I said, my voice low. "I'm making a scene?" she practically screamed, taking a step closer. Dario put a hand on her arm, not to calm her, but like he was presenting her as evidence. "You drove my sick child across town without my permission to prove some insane point that I'm a bad mother. You're trying to humiliate me." At that moment, a woman in blue scrubs with a kind, tired face and a stethoscope around her neck stepped between us. She was the pediatrician who had first seen Nico. She addressed Marcella, but looked at me. "Ma'am, we need to keep the noise level down. You're upsetting the patients." Then she turned to me fully, her voice dropping to a gentle murmur. "Could I speak with you for a moment? In the hall?" Marcella scoffed, a loud, ugly sound. "Oh, of course. Talk to the crazy one who thinks a stomachache is a 5-alarm fire." I ignored her and followed the doctor out of the room, my heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. We stopped by a deserted nurse's station. The doctor looked me straight in the eye, her expression unreadable but intensely serious. "You're his Tia, correct? You brought him in." I just nodded, unable to speak. She took a small breath. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest with me. The story you gave the triage nurse, it was a little concerning. Do you have any concerns about neglect at home?" The world tilted. The fluorescent lights of the hallway seemed to buzz louder, and for a second I felt like I was going to be sick. A part of me screamed, "Yes, tell her everything." Another part, the part that still loved my sister, recoiled in horror. It was one thing for me to, think it, to feel it in my gut. It was another to have a medical professional, a total stranger, look at the situation for 10 minutes and use a word like neglect. It was the most terrifying validation of my life. I felt a horrifying wave of relief mixed with pure dread. I finally found my voice, but it came out as a choked whisper. She's overwhelmed. There's a new baby. The doctor's gaze didn't soften. She just gave a slow, deliberate nod, like she was filing my answer away. Okay, let's wait for the blood work and the ultrasound results. She led me back to the room, where Marcella was now pacing back and forth, muttering to Dario. The doctor stood at the foot of Nico's bed, holding a tablet. The silence in the room was suddenly deafening, broken only by the soft beeping of a monitor. We have the initial results, the doctor said, her tone all business. She looked directly at Marcella. Nico has acute appendicitis. His white blood cell count is extremely high, and the ultrasound shows significant inflammation. It's on the verge of rupturing. We need to get him into emergency surgery right now. The rage drained from my sister's face so fast it was like someone had pulled a plug. The color, the anger, the self-righteous fury, it all just vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed, gray-toned shock. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The hand that had been clenched into a fist went limp at her side. She swayed slightly, and Dario, for once looking completely lost, grabbed her elbow to steady her. The entire ugly narrative she had built, of jealousy, of manipulation, of her son being a drama queen, had just been obliterated by a medical fact. And in the sudden, crushing silence, all I could hear was the sound of my sister's world crashing down around her. The room became a blur of motion. Nurses were talking in low, urgent tones, prepping an IV, talking to Nico in that calm, practiced way they have with scared children. He was so brave, just watching them with wide, dark eyes. But his hand had a death grip on mine. Dario was trying to mutter something, some weak defense about how kids get stomach aches all the time, but his words just evaporated in the sterile air. Marcella was a statue. She hadn't moved. She just stood there, staring at Nico's small body on the huge gurney, her face completely blank with shock. It was like her brain had short-circuited. A new doctor came in, a surgeon with a kind but no-nonsense face. He knelt down by Nico's bed. "Hey, champ," he said softly. "I'm Dr. Ramirez. We're going to take you for a little nap, and when you wake up, that big pain in your tummy is going to be all gone, okay?" Nico just nodded, his bottom lip trembling. The doctor gently palpated his abdomen, and Nico flinched, letting out a soft whimper. "I know, buddy. I know it hurts. Has it been hurting for a long time?" And that's when the second bomb dropped. Nico, in a tiny, raspy voice, looked at the doctor and said, "Sometimes. For months, I think. But Papa said I was being a crybaby, so I stopped telling." The words hung in the air. For months. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just the party. It wasn't just one bad night. This had been a slow-motion crisis, a bomb with a long fuse that he had been forced to carry in silence. I looked at Marcella. The blank shock on her face finally cracked, and a single tear traced a path through the makeup she'd put on for the party. She looked at Dario, and, for the first time, I saw something other than exhaustion in her eyes. It was a flicker of dawning horror. Dario just stared at the linoleum floor, his jaw tight. He couldn't even look at his own son. As they started wheeling Nico out towards the pre-op area, the surgeon Dr. Ramirez pulled us aside. His kind demeanor was gone, replaced by a stern professionalism. "I need you to understand how serious this is," he said, his eyes fixed on Marcella. "His appendix is perforated. It's already leaking toxic material into his abdomen. We were minutes, maybe an hour at most, from widespread sepsis. If your sister hadn't brought him in when she did, we would be having a very, very different conversation right now. A potentially fatal one." That was the word that broke her. Fatal. The sound that came out of my sister was something I will never forget. It wasn't a cry. It was a guttural, wounded animal noise of pure agony. She collapsed into herself, her hands flying to her mouth as if to hold back the sobs that were tearing their way out of her chest. She finally understood. She finally saw the cliff she had almost let her son walk off. Dario tried to put his arm around her, but she violently shrugged him off. And in that moment, watching her break, a wave of doubt washed over me. It was so strong it almost knocked me off my feet. "This is enough," a voice in my head whispered. "She gets it. She's broken. Don't do more. Just be her sister." I looked at her, sobbing and shattered, and the part of me that had loved her my whole life wanted to wrap my arms around her. Was what I was about to do just cruel? Was it kicking someone who was already down? But then I saw Nico's face in my mind, pale, sweating, his eyes huge with pain and fear. I heard his tiny whisper, "Tia, I can't feel my legs." And I heard my sister's response, the eye roll, the sigh, the cold dismissal. I realized the sickness wasn't just in Nico's appendix. It was in their home. It had a name, and he was, standing right there, staring at the floor. My sister's breakdown wasn't enough. She had to understand the why. She had to be ripped out of her denial completely. My resolve hardened into a diamond. Love isn't gentle when it needs to be loud. My hand moved on its own. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. Marcella looked up, her face blotchy and wet with tears, a confused question in her eyes. I didn't say a word. I navigated to my voice notes, found the file I had saved weeks ago, and pressed play. The silence of the hospital corridor was shattered by Dario's voice, amplified by the phone's tiny speaker. It was loud, condescending, and sickeningly cheerful. "Champions don't whine," his recorded voice boomed. Underneath it, you could hear the faint, heartbreaking sound of a little boy whimpering, "But Papa, it really hurts." "Man up," the recording of Dario snapped. "You're fine." The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched Dr. Ramirez's face. His professional mask dropped, and his expression hardened into one of cold, clinical anger. He took a pen from his pocket and made a sharp, deliberate note on Nico's chart. But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at my sister. Her sobs had stopped. The grief on her face was gone, replaced by something I had never seen before. It was a horrified, white-masked shock. Her eyes were wide, staring at Dario as if seeing him for the first time. It wasn't just about a burst appendix anymore. In the echo of that recording, she finally understood the poison she had let into her home. She understood the voice that had been whispering in her ear, convincing her that her son's pain was a performance. She finally understood who the villain really was. That was 3 weeks ago. Nico's surgery went well. He's home now, and the change in him is like watching a flower bloom in fast forward. The haunted, quiet little ghost is gone, and my chattering, sweet, bug-saving nephew is back. He has a cool scar on his tummy that he calls his shark bite, and he's already started drawing a comic book about it. Seeing him laugh again feels like breathing after being held underwater. The fallout at home was swift and brutal. Marcella didn't even wait for Nico to be discharged. She went home from the hospital that night, packed all of Dario's things into garbage bags, and left them on the front step. He was gone before Nico even came home. I don't know what was said between them, and I don't care to ask. All I know is that my BIL is now my sister's ex, and our family is quieter without his booming voice telling little boys to man up. She has since started therapy, and she's taking Nico to a child psychologist to help him unpack the last few months of being told his pain wasn't real. A week after Nico was home, Marcella showed up at my door. She looked older, but her eyes were clear for the first time in months. The frantic, exhausted haze was gone, replaced by a deep, gut-wrenching sadness. She didn't say anything at first, just stood on my doorstep and cried. Not the loud, hysterical sobs from the hospital, but silent, heavy tears of shame. When she could finally speak, her voice was a raw whisper. "I'm so sorry, Gabby," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "You saved his life. You saved him from me. I was drowning, and I was so focused on not going under that I didn't see I was holding him down with me." She looked me right in the eyes then, and what she said next will stay with me forever. "Promise me something. Promise me that if you ever see me failing like that again, you will overstep. Promise me you'll be this cruel again. Promise me you will never let me become that person again. We're healing. Our relationship isn't broken, but it's different. That night left a scar on us too. There's a new weight between us, a knowledge of how terribly wrong things can go. I keep telling myself that I did what I had to do, that my love for them had to be loud and sharp because a gentle voice would have been ignored. Love isn't always soft and comforting. Sometimes to save someone, it has to be a battering ram that smashes down the door of their denial. But I can't shake this awful feeling in the pit of my stomach. I didn't just help my nephew. I orchestrated a public takedown of my sister and her partner. I waited until she was at her most terrified and vulnerable, and then I used my phone like a weapon to completely humiliate her in front of a doctor. I didn't just want her to understand. I wanted to shatter her reality so completely that she would have no choice but to rebuild it from the ground up. It worked. But it was brutal. So, Reddit, I need to know. Eita, for the way I did it? I know taking him to the hospital was the right move, but was I the asshole for doing it in the cruelest, most calculated way possible to force my sister to finally see the truth?